Hey everyone, welcome into the June edition of Carallel's Caregiver Journey webinar series. I'm Matt Perrin, Director of Caregiver Engagement here at Carallel. Happy to be joined by my friend, Perry Mimms, a care advocate here at Carallel. Hey Perry.
Hi, I'm glad to be here.
Thanks for joining me. We did not coordinate ahead of time our green attire here, so just a happy coincidence. But thanks for joining us. These sessions are quick hitting 30-minute discussions, emphasis on discussion. There are no slides. These are fireside chat style conversations about hard caregiving topics. And today's topic is one of the biggest responsibilities we take on as family caregivers, and that is transportation. So thank you all for joining us. A little bit of housekeeping before we jump in. First and foremost, if you're new here, welcome. Thanks for joining. Carallel is a caregiver support company. We support caregivers in two primary ways. First and foremost, with our caregiver support line on the phone, email, or chat. That is staffed by a team of care advocates like Perry, who are professionally trained and have lived personal experience as a caregiver. So, and they're there, think of them as just an extra person in your corner. Secondly, we complement that with a digital platform we call My Care Desk, and that is just a one-stop shop, a digital caregiving hub for you to store information, connect with family and friends, keep up to date with task lists, and read lots and lots of educational material on caregiving topics A to Z. So, and we do make this service available through insurance companies and employers all over the country. The second key piece of housekeeping is about questions and comments. Please do share. We truly envision these as conversations, not presentations, and ideally not just between Perry and I, although we'll be leading the discussion certainly. So please do drop any questions, comments, thoughts in the chat. We'll do our best to respond live in the session, but certainly we'll make a point to follow up if we're not able to get to anything after the session. So now, Perry, that's all out of the way. Let's get into it. And per usual, want to hear from the audience. So I'm going to go ahead and launch our first poll. Always helpful to get a sense of what prompted people to join the discussion. And we have a big group today. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll. What's your biggest transportation challenge as a caregiver? Are you concerned with your loved one's ability? Little typo there. That's my mistake. Sorry about that. Concerned with a loved one's ability to drive safely, having the driving talk, which I think about the time I had the talk with my mom and shudder to think, or just finding people or organizations to help. Okay, so we're looks like we're about 30-70, Perry, 22, 67, and 11. So 11% concerned with my loved one's ability to drive, 22% having the driving talk, and then 67% finding people and organizations to help. I'm going to go ahead and close that because we have a majority of the vote in. What do you think, Perry? Surprised to hear that?
You know, not really. I wouldn't have been surprised with any outcome from those three questions. I do feel like all three are pretty relevant. Everybody dreads having that driving conversation, and I think we're going to talk about that, how that goes. And finding the help that you need, different organizations that can help your loved one or the person that you're caring for get the places they need to be, or sometimes escort them. You know, there's so many different nuances there, and a lot of different options. So it can get a little blurry. So I completely get why that would be a good topic to cover.
Excellent, excellent. So let's just jump in. And as always, we really try to be intentional about focusing on the practical realities of any topic that we're talking about. Focus on the practical realities and also offer, we hope, some practical solutions that we don't have any magic wands, unfortunately, but practical solutions that can help family caregivers just manage just a little bit easier through some of these challenges. So that's the goal today. And then thinking about how we structure the conversation, it made sense to me to sort of think about it chronologically, right? And it, not for everyone, not for all caregivers, but oftentimes transportation challenges begin with initial concerns about our loved one's ability to drive safely for themselves and for other people on the road. Then it sort of funnels down into actually a transition point, having that discussion, making that decision, having the talk, as it were. And then, of course, everything that comes after that, which is a whole heap of responsibility put onto us as caregivers. So I thought it made sense to structure the conversation that way. So Perry, on that first point, when we're first as caregivers sort of realizing that it may not be safe for our loved one to drive. That moment in time, I spent 8 years caregiving, and for me, that moment in time was just, if I think back and were to rank sort of some of the more stressful times, that one would be up there, just because it's driving to anyone is freedom, it's independence. And to my mom, she was a visiting nurse. It was so woven into her identity, her car, and her ability to be on the road. So what would you say to people who are having some initial concerns about their loved one's ability to drive
Okay.
safely?
Yes. So this all comes down to safety, right? Our concerns are based on safety. And I think one of the key things to start this off with is really we need to remember that it's ability and not age that should be our guide. So just because someone is 87, 92, that shouldn't be like, oh, they've reached this age. I got to have this talk. Okay. So I think we really have to respect our loved ones' independence in that way and their capabilities. So I think that's very important to start. Also, when you're kind of taking stock of whether or not this time is coming up and weighing out your concerns, there are some great programs out there that can help somebody kind of stay driving if it's appropriate. So there's evaluation courses, there's working with occupational therapists. AARP even has like a smart drivers course that people can take, or there's this great program called CarFit where you can just make sure that the car is appropriately sized up to somebody and it's geared towards older adults. So that is things like the position of the steering wheel to them, does the safety belt hit them in the right place? Is their line of vision clear? Is the car in good condition? So some of those things, even before you like dive in to really, starting to work on alternatives and next steps, it's okay to do an evaluation to see if that person's actually still okay to drive. And on that note, there are some things that you can do when you are getting a little bit you're noticing things a little bit more,
Mm-hmm.
like was there a close call? Did the person you're caring for mention that something scary happened when they were on the road? Are they distracted when you talk to them or when you're in the car with them?
Mm-hmm.
Are they getting lost? These are big signs. Also, medical, there's a lot of medical concerns. Like if somebody has cataracts and they're having trouble seeing or different things like that, or a hearing problem can be extremely dangerous when you're driving. These are all kind of things to kind of figure out where the concern is coming from so you can address it the right way.
Yeah. Okay. So there was a lot there, and I love the comment that you made around ability, not age. Um, for me, uh, it just was this whole topic just brings up a lot of memories for me. But I love the way just succinctly you kind of sum that up. And um, I when my mom was living with Alzheimer's disease, so when she got the quote unquote diagnosis initially, I automatically said, well, no, she can't. There's so much wrapped up in that. So I love the way you put it. So when we have these concerns, then I think it's probably a good segue to sort of talk a little bit about how do we actually communicate them? How do we have the conversation? And it, how do you, everything from the sort of preparation to actually having the talk, because I know it was really difficult for me, and it wasn't just one conversation, it was a series of them, but extremely challenging. So what would you share there as it relates to actually, once the decision has been made, um, having the discussion or discussions?
Well, I like that you said that to start off. It's just not one discussion, it can be discussions. So when we put so much weight on having one family meeting and and put a lot of pressure and expectation on it, it's so easy to get defensive, and people get defensive when they're talking about losing the ability to do this anyways, right? It, like you
Mm-hmm.
said in the beginning, this is freedom, this is independence. It's a lessening of their capabilities on an everyday basis, and it's people really feel that. I know we talk about personal stories sometimes, but my grandmother growing up, when I it's a little while back, but when she could no longer drive, she never put up a fight about not driving. In fact, she was very happy to have other people drive her around, but she still insisted on getting her driver's license every time it was up because she didn't want to lose that feeling of dignity, of independence, even though she wasn't
Mm-hmm.
using it. So, you got to remember who you're talking to. I wouldn't make it one big conversation. I think what's really nice, a nice way to approach it is, to kind of make it conversational versus a lecture. So, asking questions to help them take stock of their own comfort and ability driving. For example, it could be, how are you feeling driving at night? Have you been comfortable driving on the highways or just the small roads? And then as things start to progress in your conversation or conversations, I think it's important to bring up again safety, and not just their safety, which is a big part of it, right? But also the other people on the road. So for
Mm-hmm.
personal safety, I mean, when I was thinking about it, I'm like, there are so many distracted drivers out there now. There are so many people texting, they have their
Yeah.
phones, like they're not paying as much attention, and it's really putting a lot of defensive driving responsibilities on this person who may or may
Mm-hmm.
not be able to do that to that extent anymore. So that's one thing to bring up, their safety. And then, Grandma, you live in a neighborhood with a lot of kids on their bikes and it's summertime.
Mm-hmm.
There's other people out there. So expressing it on both ends can be good.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I think, Matt, you say something nice about this, about it being using the condition. Is that not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was what ultimately, if I think back to those conversations with my mother, that was uh, the thing, that ultimately got us sort of to a breakthrough, right? It didn't, it wasn't like, oh, mom, it's your Alzheimer's disease, it's not you. It's not like I said that once and she was like, okay, I don't want to drive anymore. But that got her thinking, and sort of consistently in the conversations reinforcing the fact that this isn't about you. And you mentioned dignity, like so much of everything that goes into caregiving, Perry. It's about, um, preserving dignity and helping, our loved one, be it a spouse, a partner, a parent, a grandparent, retain their sense of purpose and identity. And that's very much the case here in this conversation. And separating my mom from, what was happening in her brain, in her case, really seemed to help. And I love what you said, Perry. I combined that, based on advice. I didn't think of this my own, but with making it about others, right? Less about her safety, more about the safety of other people. Um, and that seemed to work for, in my case. Um, as a result of sort of going back to it over and over and over again. The other thing I'd say is I did my best to, again, based on advice, enroll other people in the process. So my mom's physician, her neurologist, my mom's friends. I tried to get as many people to sort of, um, be in her ear about it as possible. But definitely wasn't easy. But hopefully these tips help. We have a question that I'm seeing here. It's a long question, so I'm going to just read it. Can the driving talk be applied to the caregiver talk? So I'm assuming that's the conversation about getting your loved one to accept help coming into the home. That's my perception. And then she goes, okay, so I guess we'll leave it there, because other questions that I'll answer offline sort of related to recommendations for other sessions, which are fantastic. So can the driving talk be combined with the caregiver talk? My gut instinct, or my answer would be, it's probably best to keep them separate, but they're very similar conversations in a lot of ways. That would be how I'd answer it for myself if I were back rewind 3 years ago and I was still in a caregiving situation. What would you say to that, Perry?
So I think it goes again to having conversations, not one conversation.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it could definitely be a part of this, like the series of conversations that you're having with your loved one based on concerns for their safety. And there are separate things with like checklists that you can kind of go through the house to see if somebody is starting to need in-home care. Is the fruit in the refrigerator, up to date or past date, or different things like that. But the approach is similar. The approach is the same. I mean, in my experience, and what we often guide people is conversational, not lecturing.
Mm-hmm.
Also asking those leading questions about, like, how do you feel? Do you think you're doing well on your own? What would you like help with if you could have help with anything? And again, making it conversational, non-confrontational. And just like we would suggest often, if you want to have a team of backup, not that you're putting pressure on the person, but that you're showing that it's a universal concern, is, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but the respect that the people that I've cared for have for their physician that they've had for years, their primary care. If the primary care says something once that I've said 12 times, they are so much more likely to get through. Now, everybody's different, but that's been in my experience. So having a medical professional or an outside party that they have respect for, and that they listen to, be a part of that conversation, can only help.
Okay. Well, hopefully that answered your question, audience member. And if there are follow-up questions, please do drop them in the chat. We'll do our best to respond here. And either way, we'll definitely respond after we're done. So, okay, so let's just step back and take stock where we are. We've covered a little bit about sort of early concerns, how sort of we can process those and act on them ultimately with to your point, Perry, a series of conversations. I love the way you put that. So then let's talk. We have 11 minutes here. Let's talk about what comes after, right? So and I just have such vivid memories of when my mom started driving. That's when I really felt like a caregiver. Like that's when I was like, oh man, there was just so much, such a demand on time and responsibility. So I think of the sort of transportation, everyday transportation challenges in a couple of different ways. First and foremost, there's just what I was mentioning, the toll and the time on me, right, as a primary caregiver for mom. So let's talk about that for a second. And the big thing that helped me sort of process that and sort of get my arms around it all was sitting down and doing some advanced planning. I know there's no rocket science in that, but it really, really helped me sort of understand on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis where my mom needed to be, appointments and the like, and where my mom wanted to be, as important, just as important. Did she want to be at her friend Bonnie's house? Did she want to be at her card game, even though she wasn't playing cards anymore? So getting all of that stuff onto one calendar, one piece of paper, so I could see it holistically and then determine what I could do and what I couldn't. That was sort of step one for me in terms of getting my arms around this just entirely new, some days feeling like life-consuming responsibility that I had, So that was sort of step one. The second was once I had visibility into where the gaps were, asking asking for help from friends or family, where if there were appointments that I knew I didn't have to be at, farming that out to, I only had one family member close, but I had a couple of my mom's friends who I sort of wrangled into the process. And then, I had to look for services that could fill gaps when those friends and family members couldn't, right? And so I started, Perry, I just went to the area agency on aging. It's called Council on Aging in my mom's town where she lives. How'd I do? I guess is my question. Like, what else would you tell someone in that situation to do to sort of navigate this?
So I think you voiced pretty much the majority of the concerns and how overwhelming it can seem.
Yeah,
I think it's really important to remember it, if possible, it's not just you. So,
yeah.
for example, when you were saying your mom wanted to go to a card game. Well, were some of the other people going to that card game driving? Could they pick her up and drop her off on the way? You know, you're right. Taking stock and having the schedule out, and then realizing, oh, this is a doctor's appointment. I definitely want to do the transportation for this because I want to be a part of the conversation.
Hmm.
That's definitely a huge part of it. Um, and then, yes, the ADRC for transportation for a million things. The Area Agency on Aging or Disability Resource is an agency that's specific to your county or your zip code or your location. And the goal of
Hmm.
these agencies is to encourage independence for elderly and disabled people in the community. They vary on what they have in different locations. It's not all the same, but transportation is usually a big part of it. So whether that is one, finding transportation to get to and from things, two, do they need a companion to go with them? So
Hmm.
sometimes, it might not be an appointment that that you don't need to go to or something like that. But if it's something where it's gotten to the point where your loved one is no longer able to go to any of these activities on their own, so sometimes the area agency on aging can help with that. Um, there's also the Transportation Association in your county, so you can call them. Senior centers sometimes have programs where they'll take socialization, and being isolated is a big thing that can come up when you lose
Hmm.
your ability to take yourself places. So a lot of times centers have outings that they can do where there's transportation included. I mean, there's a lot of different things out there, and I think it's a good idea to pull from more than one resource. So
Yeah.
you have yourself, you have the friends and family. Sometimes, religious-based communities have volunteers that'll help with this. That area agency on aging. I say whatever is out there,
Hmm.
try to get it. I'm a big fan. I think this has a lot to do with advocating a lot for yourself as a caregiver and your loved one. If the service is out there and you're eligible for it, see if it can help you,
Yeah.
just in general. So.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And between, I went to the area agency on aging. So between that and I also, something else I did was ask my mother's primary care um, for any recommendations that they had. So between those two actions, I had a pretty solid list of options. Most of them were affordable as well because they're offered by the town or county. So, and then there are also other services out there. They weren't available when I was in this position, but services like Papa and even the ride sharing services, which like Lyft or Uber now, they're not necessarily a fit for everyone, and some of it depends on sort of this your specific, your loved one's specific health situation. But those are also options that people can consider.
Yeah, the Uber and the Lyfts can be sometimes tricky, the ride shares, only because one, often technology is involved, so they have to be
Yeah,
pretty good on their app, which
right,
applies to some
absolutely.
people and not to other. Some, and also Uber and Lyft in different areas offer different services.
Yeah.
So you would want to check for the area that your loved one is in, because in some cities they will have more like medically geared transportation or phone numbers you can call if you're not
Hmm.
using an app. But I don't believe, and we would always have to check with Uber and Lyft, but I don't
Yep.
believe it. universal throughout all the areas. So it is,
Yeah.
it is something that you can check out as well.
Okay. Okay. So that's in terms of everyday challenges, that is the sort of toll and time sort of category of the challenge. Then there's actual logistics, right? So when we're actually bringing our loved one places, sometimes like it got very difficult for me to get my mom into the car, out of the car. There were times when she got agitated. Like um, it wasn't the transportation and the car rides with mom that I remembered, right? There's a lot more that went into it logistically. So what would you share with the audience on that front, Perry?
A lot of that's disease specific. So if it's like a mobility issue that's causing someone to have a hard time getting in and out of a car, working with an occupational therapist or a home health to do family training, as well as figure out if there's any mechanical things that can be working on to make that transition in and out of the car. Sometimes people will use things like gate belts or different things like that that can assist. This is also going back to that car fit program, making sure that the car is appropriately set up for your loved one to be comfortable in it. And then also, I mean, it's once they're in the car, again, you want them to be comfortable. So if it's a mobility issue, there's different things as far as how the seat is, and if they need any support in their back or different things like that. But then if it's more of a dementia or Alzheimer's related agitation, I think you had good suggestions on this, but like using personal patience, but also using different tools and being prepared with things like snacks or music that they like in the car, things that they find soothing. Sometimes people, I've known people that really like to use their hands a lot, and they feel comfortable if they're folding or if they're knitting. So even having cloth in the car to keep their hands busy. I mean, these are all
Yeah.
different stages of a disease, but so there's definitely different ways, but it is good to be prepared. Have a bag ready with maybe spare clothing if it's that type of trip that's for a period of time, or that there might be an issue. Using the washroom before, which we should all probably do before any road trip, and then also making sure you have things like their medication for whatever trip you're going on. So just be
Yeah.
prepared.
Yeah, the bag was that was a big development when I finally got a go bag ready. But and we didn't even talk about knitting, but my mom was a knitter. In the earlier times, she would knit in the car. That would keep her occupied. When she couldn't do that any longer, again, living with Alzheimer's, she really loved the fidget blanket. So that was in the bag. Music for sure. Anne Murray, even though it just hurts my ears to listen to Anne Murray. We had a lot of Anne Murray to soothe, but really good suggestion. So one thing before, and we're at time almost. So the Ride Fit program you've mentioned a couple of times. How do people learn about that? Where would they find information about that?
It's through an organization called Chorus. CH gosh, they spell it kind of funny, but it has to do with safety on the road for older persons.
Okay.
And they have a car fit program. Sometimes they come to your area and have actual events. And
Hmm.
then other times you can go on there online and they have a PDF that you can download with tips and different guidelines about where the line of sight should be, how far you should be from the steering wheel, all those things that we were kind of touching on.
Okay. Great. Well, time flies when we're having fun. It's 12:30 here on the East Coast. Um, Thank you everyone for joining today. If there are questions that you didn't get a chance, I see a few that we didn't get to, Perry. I will respond to those personally after the session today. But if you're thinking about this and you have questions, do send them in. You can just reply to your registration emails, and those will find their way to my inbox. I guess last thing is stay tuned for information on July. We're almost in July, but stay tuned for information on the July session, where we'll be talking about palliative care and hospice care, and really sort of diving into what the differences are and how they can help. I'm really excited for that discussion. So that will be happening in the last week of July. And Perry, as always, thank you for joining.
Yeah, this was
fun.
really fun. I know it's a big topic, but
It is.
We can do this, just give advocate for yourself, advocate for your loved one, and you will find a way.
Awesome. Thanks, Perry.
All right. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.